It's brand new, Season 2. I'm Marissa Thalberg.
And I'm Stephen Wolf Bedeta, and we're excited to be back having bigger, bolder, and always real conversations.
Straight from the C-suite front lines of marketing, media, and more.
We have great friends joining from people you may know, like Wilmer Valderrama and Bobby Burke.
And people you'll want to know. So grab a coffee or, hey, even an Aperol Spritz and come join us on America's #1 podcast network, iHeart.
Listen to Brand New on the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Imagine you're a fly on the wall at a dinner between the Mafia, the CIA, and the KGB. That's where my new podcast begins. This is Neil Strauss, host of To Live and Die in LA, and I wanted to quickly tell you about an intense new series about a dangerous spy taught to seduce men for their secrets and sometimes their lives. From Tenderfoot TV, this is To Die For. To Die For is available now. Listen for free on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, acclaimed comics writer and notorious Scott Summers hater, Rosie Knight.
Well, hello, Emmy-winning podcaster and totally unbiased Targaryen royal supporter, Jason Concepcion.
Somehow the X-Ray Vision podcast has returned.
And like always, we'll be here every week.
You'll hear from TV writers, actors, comics creators, pop culture critics.
Nothing is off the table.
Listen to X-Ray Vision on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Episode 408. What happens when you stop impulse shopping?
Welcome to the Frugal Friends podcast, where you'll learn to save money, embrace simplicity, and live a richer life. Here are your hosts, Jen and Jill.
Welcome to the Frugal Friends podcast. My name is Jen.
My name is Jill.
And today we want to share with you some stories that we have compiled from around the internet of people who have overcome their mindless impulse shopping and what that's like on the other side, in a hopes of showing you that A, impulse spending is not the enemy, and B, when you can improve your spending and feel good about that, there's less restriction and deprivation and more freedom and joy.
Mm-hmm. This is a conversation that's hard to actually find on the internet because it seems like most people are searching how to stop impulse spending. There's all sorts of variations on how to stop, but there's not a whole lot said about, well, then, is it possible? And what does it then bring me out of life? And that's what we want to look at. Like, what comes after that? Who has this actually worked for? And what are the benefits? Is it even something worth trying to interrupt all of these impulse purchases? We all think we want to stop, but for what? But before we get to that, this episode is brought to you by being a good influence. If this wasn't you in high school or college, or maybe even now is the time to redeem yourself. Be a good influence on your friends by telling them about the Friendletter. Send them your unique link in the bottom of the emails that you get from us. And for every sign up you get, we will reward you. Well, we'll reward you even for just your first sign up. Then you get up to different tiers. If you get 5 signups, 10 signups, there's different things that we will send to your actual location, Frugal Friends merch. So be a good influence. It's never too late. And it doesn't have to be that much work on your part. And it's free. frugalfriendspodcast.com to get the Friendletter if you don't already get it. And if you do already get it, then share it with your friends.
So we talk a lot about impulse buying on the show. We've got a couple episodes that you can queue up after this one. Episode 378, Psychological Reasons Why We Impulse Buy. Episode 351, Impulse Buying, What It Is and How to Stop. And it's always a topic that goes over really well with you guys. It's always one of our most highly downloaded episodes of the quarter, kind of whenever we include it. And so this one, we wanted to include stories about not how to do it, though we will go through in these stories. We'll talk about like how they did it, why they did it, but really the experience on the other side. What does reality look like? Because there's no perfection in overcoming impulse shopping, our brains crave instant gratification. They are always looking for shortcuts. They're always looking for a dopamine hit. So there are ways that we can improve the health of how we pursue that, but we're never going to be perfect in our pursuit of it. So we wanted to give you encouragement and some how-tos on how to get to that other side of the journey of that pursuit. So this first story that we're going to talk about is from The Financial Diet, and it's from Cynthia Dubois. I quit shopping for a whole year. Here's how it changed my life. And so she recounts her experience. She lives in Europe, somewhere where they use euros, but she works in the fashion industry, in retail. And so she earned a very low income for a long time. So when she started freelance writing and her income drastically went up, she made more than she ever had. There was more money to pay the bills, but there wasn't more management in how the excess happened, like excess got spent. So Cynthia decided to quit shopping for a year, which is something, even as proponents of no spend challenges, we don't typically recommend, but I did like the way that she did it. And in the radical middle, we're always searching for our place, like between the extremes, but we do think it's healthy to visit extremes for a short period of time, which is why we like a 30-day no spend challenge. It's really a good way to visit that extreme. And the reason we like visiting these extremes is because it gives you a crash course in like the one thing. And if you know me, you know I love the book, The One Thing. And this book is summarized basically in what's the one thing I can do that which by doing makes other things easier or unnecessary. And so she chose her one thing to stop spending. And she had clear goals in mind when she stopped. She wanted to create a 6-month emergency fund, pay off high-interest debt, and start saving money for a deposit on an apartment, which are fantastic goals. And those are achievable when you are focusing on one thing at a time. And she wasn't focused. The goal wasn't to create the emergency fund. The goal was to stop spending. And that was the one thing which by doing, those other goals would happen. Like if her goal was just create an emergency fund, that's a really like out there goal. It doesn't have strategy behind it. It's harder to achieve goals like that. But when you make your goals action-based, like Cynthia did, it becomes a lot easier to meet your goals because they become byproducts. So she set some rules. So there were things, she wasn't allowed to buy anything except for things on her list. And so she prioritized spending on food, exercise, B12 shots, because she says she's a vegan and those are important for her, refills and renewals. She gave herself 1 coffee a week and 1 dinner a month because she had created what she called an unhealthy social life. She says, I had to meet someone for coffee around 6 times a week for the whole year. So though having a lot of friends is a blessing, it's also expensive. And this parameter gave her the option to be creative with how she met that need for hanging out with her friends. And she also included presents for other people because she didn't want to be cheap and eradicate generosity, which we love. We think this is a very good list. And everything else off limits. So things on her no-buy list, specifically that were problems for her: books, clothes, secondhand or new makeup, apps, art supplies, pins, shoes, the cute little thing I saw in a window that one time, snacks, nail polish, tickets, and alcohol. So again, love this list. You can say everything else is off limits, but actually naming and writing down the things that are the biggest problems for you is really powerful. So she's saying no buy isn't low buy or minimalism. I think this is another important distinction. I see a lot of people do low buy, which isn't a problem. But I think doing the no spend month is a lot more powerful than doing a quote unquote low buy, because the point is to take that decision off the table. We're reducing decision fatigue by taking the decision of whether to buy something unplanned or not off the table. Low buy, you still have that decision. And so while she did put some things in her approved buy list, everything else off of that was off limits. It's a no buy. And so I think that's really powerful for doing that. So let's talk about the results after a year. She says, I know it sounds bizarre, but I did it. I stuck to my guns, didn't spend a penny outside of my rules. In fact, I spent less than I was allowed, only going for a coffee every 2 or 3 months rather than once a week. And she did this in 2019. And so by December of 2019, she earned just over $21,000, which is not a lot. 21,000 American, 16,000 euros. And she had saved a total of 45.2% of that. So granted, I'm thinking she lived at home because she was saving up for an apartment, but she was able to like really, really save a lot more than the rest of us that are making way more than that. So she paid off a bank loan 2 years early, and even after paying off the loan, ended the year with 6 months worth of emergency funds. So she achieved her first 2 out of 3 goals. So then she goes into what she learned. Quitting shopping is more challenging than most people think, mainly because they're not aware of how much they shop unconsciously. When people think of shopping, their minds immediately drop images of Elle Woods from Legally Blonde or Vivian Ward's empowering shopping bag flex in Pretty Woman. And so they see those and they say, I'm not a shopper. I don't go shopping. But they do. People shop all the time, especially when earning minimum wage, because we want to feel like everyone else who's successful and has the money to shop. People want to fit in. So even though we're not buying like Gucci, we'll buy a scrunchie. So a new pair of sunglasses because the last pairs is out of fashion. So this is a lot of the stuff she learned. And this quote is kind of the takeaway. My no-buy year not only helped me grow financially, but it also helped me truly appreciate what I have, grow in determination, self-acceptance, and self-respect. I work hard for my money, and I no longer allow the media or society to trick me into thinking I have to spend it elsewhere to be good enough. I am more than good enough, and my future deserves my finances more than any shop or company ever will.
Yeah, that's a really great takeaway. I think there's certainly a difference between a no-buy year and interrupting impulse spending habits. But I think this is a good highlight of that definitely did happen. This very extreme no-buy year ended up helping to highlight where purchases typically happen, what leads to them, what can be alternatives. And I don't think everybody needs to do this. I mean, we're not doing it.
Right. Yeah.
I do not plan to do a no-buy year, but I think highlighting what then happens on the other side. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me is what did it then lead to? If we are trying to decrease impulse purchases because we don't like what it's doing to our wallets, we don't like the way we feel about our impulse purchases, this is somebody on the other side of it. They really did get a hold of all of their spending, not just impulse buys, and are now highlighting that it helped them to grow financially, reach some financial goals. It can have that benefit, but also truly appreciate what she has. And then these deeper things of self-acceptance and self-respect, which the story I'm about to highlight also said that too, which I don't think I anticipated that when we were even researching stories for this episode. But this is kind of not necessarily go into it expecting this result, but know that there could be unexpected results that happen when we do make efforts to decrease the amount that we are impulse spending.
Yeah. Another thing she says in here that I think is really a great picture of life after, this mindless impulse spending. And I say mindless because some impulse spends can be intentional, and we'll talk about that later. But she said, we choose to buy things because they represent the life we're not living, but are yearning to live. I was so unhappy in myself that I bought things to try and construct myself into a glorious pinnacle of capitalistic success, but none of it made me feel fulfilled. And it certainly didn't keep me financially stable. And so much of our financial empowerment is not seen on the outside. And we are so much striving to belong, even just subconsciously yearning to belong. And so that causes us to spend on things. And so it's hard to reprogram yourself to value things that are unseen more than what is seen. But I think the determination, the self-acceptance, and the self-respect is definitely I think it's worth it to get there.
So the next story comes from The Fun-Sized Life, titled, I stopped buying clothes for 3 years and it changed my life and finances. This is by Renee. And it starts out saying, if you would have told me 5 years ago that there would come a day that I would stop shopping completely, there's no way I would have believed you. She describes how clothes were her life. She had a shoe club membership, closet was jam-packed, loved high heels, loved bargain clothes, and then decided to stop buying clothes altogether for 3 years. So again, we're looking at some of these extreme examples, although this is what these people thought they needed to do to kind of get at the solution for themselves. So if that's you, then go for it. But also, no, I think you can find these takeaways for yourself in less extreme ways. But for this person specifically, it was not getting the clothes and realizing that it really did change life and finances. In the process, she realized that she actually had a shopping problem, getting caught up in the rush of spending, tossing items into a shopping cart, and yet struggled with so much guilt, didn't want to wear the clothes she had bought, was too ashamed to return them to the store. And she said, let me tell you, nothing sucks more than a closet full of regret and an empty checking account. Wah, wah. And then realizing that she wanted more than a full wardrobe, wanting her financial picture to look better. And that clothing was a lot of where her impulse spending was happening. But recognizing that she'd rather be spending on things like traveling or being able to just spend time with her kids, her spouse, and realizing that shopping habits were actually keeping her from all of those things. So it did get pretty bad for her, spending money before a payday, telling herself just buying one more thing would be happy, would make her happy. So really going to this extreme is what ultimately helped her. She did end up with the money that she now wasn't spending on impulse buys, be able to pay off debt, increase retirement investing, save for emergencies. She actually was able to travel more. So while not impulse buying the $5 shirt might not seem like a massive drop in the bucket, it sounds like it made a big shift just in her financial mindset, where certainly some of that money was actually freed up. And also her views on her finances changed as well. Another thing that I really want to highlight about her story was where clearance racks intersected her impulse shopping. And we did an episode recently too on the psychology of getting a deal and how this is something we might be more drawn to. If it's on sale, then it's for me. And she talks about how there'd be times where instead of scooping up a $40 sweater that she really liked and felt like was actually in her style and her colors and her size, she would go to the clearance section of the store and instead buy 5 shirts for $5 a piece, thinking she got a bargain. So at the end of the day, still spending the same amount of money as if she had bought that one really beautiful sweater, but instead opting for all these things that maybe weren't in the color that she wanted, not a style she wanted, but they were cheap. And I do think that we can use that word accurately in this example, that it's just something cheap when you're just getting all the different pieces at a good price and not actually getting the thing that would maybe be more in line with your values. And she then began to equate that to devaluing herself. So rather than getting something that fits her, that she feels good in, she was loading up her closet with things that might have been a good price, but nothing she actually liked. And that's why we can find ourselves with closets of things and say we have nothing to wear. Some of it might really date back to our spending habits. Is it because we keep buying things just because they're inexpensive, but we don't actually like them and they don't last us long and they're quickly out of style because it's fast fashion? So this takeaway from her was really powerful to me. And I think that a lot of us probably could relate if we started to look at our spending in this way and realize what's behind it and what would happen if I really did value myself. So I think sometimes we think, oh, I'm getting this thing and it is a way that I'm caring for myself, is to go shopping, get myself a treat, buy myself something that I love. But then to realize it actually wasn't treating myself. I'm not actually caring for myself because it's nothing that I love or I'm actually going to wear. It's actually a devaluing of myself. And that pivot was massive. So if we're talking again about the things that happen when we stop impulse spending, I think it's really learning, what does it actually mean to value myself? What does it actually mean to buy quality products that I enjoy, rather than just doing this as an activity?
Yeah, I like how she says that she had to separate her stuff from her status and worth. And I think a lot about our home renovation and not wanting to over renovate. I like just for an investment purpose, but like seeing other people's kitchens, trying to get inspiration and thinking like our kitchen isn't going to be big enough or good enough. And like, yes, it was worth it for me to renovate this house because that's why we bought it, is to renovate it and then one day resell it. But like also feeling this like weird guilt in that like, okay, now I have this like really aesthetic home and I'm trying to like promote to people like you don't need an aesthetic home. And so trying to find like separating what we've done, which isn't like investment numbers, just like improving the property, from like, is it good enough? Is it too Is it too good? Like, and we do that like normally we only think about that stuff like with Stanley cups and clothes.
Yeah.
But it's bigger than that. Like she mentions her car. Like we buy these cars that make us feel like we look more wealthy. And I'm not talking Porsches and Teslas, but like we buy the brand new Toyota when the 5-year-old Toyota, it's a Toyota. It's going to last for 200,000 miles, but we buy cars before we actually need them because we want something new, because we either want to feel like we're in something new when we can't afford anything else really nice. It's more acceptable to get a car loan than a boat loan. But then we also want to show up in the car line and not look like a mess, look like we're going to parent our children well. I don't know why we feel like the need, like our car is important to make other parents think that we're a good parent.
As long as it has a car seat, then you're good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So to boil it down, her main takeaways when she was able to interrupt her impulse shopping of clothing, she found that she saved money, was able to reach financial goals as a result of some of that saved money. She learned more about herself and finally, and I feel like most importantly, grew a greater value for herself and learned how to actually value herself.
When it comes to ensuring your company has top-notch security practices, things can get complicated fast. Vanta automates compliance for ISO 27001 SOC 2 and more, saving you time and money. Unify your security program management and streamline security reviews with AI-powered security questionnaires. Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Cora use Vanta to build trust and prove security in real time. Access Vanta's free suite of resources to scale your governance, risk, and compliance program at vanta.com/special. That's VANTA.com/special.
We started talking about this incident. Drugs and officials cover up. You couldn't believe it.
From iHeart Podcasts.
It's like the police knew who he was before they got here.
A story about money, power, and corruption.
The medical school dean at USC was leading a secret double life.
She's breathing right now? Yes, she's absolutely breathing. I'm a doctor, actually.
There's no way that guy is a doctor.
I'm Paul Pringle, and I'm an investigative reporter for the LA Times. This is the story of an investigation that starts in a hotel room in Pasadena, California, and reaches all the way to the top of two of the most powerful institutions in the city of Los Angeles.
When people fall in line, they fall in line.
Looking back, I realized, everyone knew.
This is Fallen Angels, a story of California corruption.
We're always going to have predators. It's the good people who stand by and do nothing that allow them to flourish.
Listen to Fallen Angels, a story of California corruption on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, my name's Jay Shetty, and I'm the host of On Purpose. I just had a great conversation with Michael B. Jordan, and you can listen to it right now. Michael is known for his performances in both film and television. His breakout role was in Fruitvale Station, playing Oscar Grant, which earned him widespread praise and numerous award nominations. His portrayal of Killmonger in Marvel's Black Panther, one of my favorites, further solidified his status as one of Hollywood's leading actors, earning him widespread acclaim for his complex and compelling performance. In our conversation, Michael really opens up. You're going to love listening to it, and I can't wait for you to check it out.
The closest to getting what you want is always the hardest. It's always the feeling when you're getting ready to, people give up right before they get what they've always wanted to get. People quit.
Listen to On Purpose with Jay Shetty on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
So our final story is from YNAB, and it's How I Stopped Impulse Buying, the redemption story of a recreational spender. And it's funny, recreational spender, but it is one of the reasons that we talk about in our book, which is a main driver behind impulse spending. It's because we view shopping as an activity. It's something we do when we're bored. It's something we do on the weekend. We go, maybe not to the mall anymore, but we go to the farmer's market. We go downtown and browse the shops. Shopping is socially an activity. And so a lot of us are recreational spenders. And so Lindsay, the author of this article, talks about, she's like, I knew buying a shirt wouldn't improve my life, wouldn't take away the stress of childcare, musical chairs, or missed deadlines, or what we would eat for dinner. I knew it, except especially if it was a really pretty shirt, sometimes it did sort of help. And so that's another, like, in addition to the recreational shopping, I think we all have these underlying, like, stresses and anxieties. So when we get there, maybe we didn't plan on buying anything, but these things creep up and they do make us feel a little better. So in her story, when she talks about life after I stopped impulse buying, she said, I've learned that long-term goals are infinitely more satisfying than any knee-jerk spending reaction. Call me old-fashioned or maybe just old, but nothing brings me greater joy than knowing I have money in the bank. A lot of it has to do with priorities. What's actually important to you in a year or 5 years or 20 years down the road, being debt-free, financial security, paid off house, paying for your kids' college, living comfortably. And I think those things, yes, become more important later, but I would say your priorities are deeper than that. They're your internal needs. They're your time, having control over your time, investing in relationships with your family and friends, feeling like you're living into your purpose in life. And like those are the greater things that we want, but those all take money. And so figuring out what you need to do with your money in order to get those. It's like in the first example, she focused on her spending, and by focusing on that, she could then do all these other things. Well, first she focused on her income and got that. And then when that wasn't the solution to everything, then started focusing on her spending. And I would say do it the other way around, but we each have our own journey to it. And she says, don't get me wrong, I still like to shop, but it's no longer a pastime. When I do, I know exactly how that shopping fits in with the rest of my priorities. And so that's another thing. Like you can still enjoy shopping. It still meets some of the biological, things our body's wired to do. The dopamine hit, the oxytocin, like it can still be enjoyable. But as a go-to activity, it's not healthy. And as a way to alleviate stress or to kind of buy your way into being somebody you want to be, again, not healthy. And I think that's a lot of the reasons that we impulse buy. And for people who have overcome it, they are finding their value outside of these things.
Yeah, it is cool to hear stories of other people, what they did to intersect and interrupt their impulse spending, but then what they found afterwards. And all of our stories are going to be different, just like theirs were. Each one of them kind of found different things in that journey. But rest assured, there is good things on the other side of putting this into practice, of trying to reduce how much you impulse spend. If it's something that you want to do, if you're identifying, yeah, this is an issue, which most of us do identify. Like, I don't want to just be spending without a plan, and I'd rather put that money towards something else, but for some reason I keep doing this. And so we asked you all in the friend letter, frugalfriendspodcast.com, if you're not getting the friend letter, and we polled you on this. We asked, what's your biggest trigger for spending? So there were different options. Is it the time of day? Is it where you're at or where you're about to be going? Is it where you came from? Is it your current emotional state? Is it other people? What are the things that trigger your impulse spending? And dearly all of you, like by landslide, well, yeah, a lot of you said it's an emotional state. So, and then the second most popular answer is where I'm going, kind of where you're headed to is what will trigger your spending, but emotional state. And I think that is, I can commiserate with that. If I'm going to impulse spend, it's going to have a lot to do with whatever's going on inside of me, whatever need that I have at the moment, whether excited or sad or stressed. It's what we can go to quickly because we think it's going to provide us what we need.
Yeah, that aligns with the research we did for the book is what are the biggest triggers for impulse spending? And it is absolutely emotional state. And typically that emotional state is stress or some kind of like anxiety, some kind of perceived loss of control. And you're trying to gain that control back by doing something in your control, which is shopping. But we just wanted to highlight a few healthier things in your control, a few healthy coping mechanisms that you can use in real time. I think some of the common threads in these stories are the spending fast. So the first one was a complete no spend challenge. The second one was no spending on one category. And this one, she didn't do that, but she said, And when she talks about things I did to stop impulse buying, the first one is have a kid. And she said when she had a kid, she no longer had like free days. You know, she didn't have the availability to go do all the spending. But so I think that's a common thread. But like when we take something away, we've got to replace it with something. And we can't always replace it with a kid or want to, because they're expensive. So these are just some ways that we can replace that action in order to follow through with whatever method we're going to be using to identify and stop, take a pause from impulse spending.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important that these things we do are just as easy as going shopping. Yeah. So just as easy as going shopping on your phone, just as easy as driving yourself to the store. You know, it's a nice idea to get out and find friends and go play a game of volleyball. But like, what can you do in the very moment when you might just open up your phone and shop Amazon? So that's where my mind was at when I'm thinking about these things. And you know, I can only speak for myself. You're going to have to come up with your own list, but this could be a helpful guide. I think one of the reasons that we do impulse spend when we're feeling any type of emotion is to meet a need. And it can be really helpful if we can give ourselves the extra little bit of time and space to identify what is the need or what is the emotion that I'm experiencing. We will grab for something that we think worked in the past and do that thing, like spending, and then realize that it didn't actually meet the need. So we're going to be far more successful in actually caring for ourselves, actually valuing ourselves if we can identify what it is first. So I just wrote down a couple of common emotions I can feel and things that I go to in those moments. Again, I think it's important for you to also write down what are some of your common emotions and what do you think would be easy to do activities that could help you and actually serve you in that moment when you're feeling that emotion. So for me, it's when I'm stressed, when I'm feeling celebratory, when I'm sad or upset, or when I'm antsy. There you go. I oscillate between those four types of states of being, and all of them could lead me to buy. So specifically when I'm feeling stressed, I've noticed that it helps me to get outside. And there is a lot of research to back this, just being out in nature, being able to look at the horizon line, breathe in fresh air, look at trees. Just looking at trees apparently does something for our brain. It's wild. I recognize that getting outside is not something we can always do all year round. But even if you can just get out for a few seconds, for me, even when I lived in the North, getting outside for just a few seconds, breathing in that crisp air really did help a reset. And also for me, doing something simple with my hands. So when I'm feeling stressed, I might take a break and get up and water my plants or weed. That might actually help me to reduce some tension that I'm experiencing. That solves a lot of things. That gets me outside. It gets me doing something with my hands, and it gets me completing a chore, which is great. So those are just some examples when I'm stressed. When I'm feeling celebratory, I recognize that I usually want to share that with somebody. So whether that's texting a friend or calling a friend or just giving myself an opportunity to take a break, or for me, I do like treats. I like food treats. So I might just go to my pantry and see what do I have that I can treat myself with. Treats. I'm feeling celebratory. Lemon water to me, you roll your eyes all you want. It feels like a treat. I love squeezing myself some fresh lemon water. So these are just some simple interruptions to instead of me going and buying something. Then if I'm feeling sad or upset, I may choose to listen to some moody music and doodle, or I might want to pull myself out of feeling like I'm in a funk, and I might choose to watch something funny or dramatic or whatever. I can still go online and do some of these things. It's just not going to be me online inputting my credit card information. And finally, feeling antsy. This happens for me a lot because I work from home, and so does my husband, and we hardly get out of the house. And something I'm noticing is when we get out of the house, that's then when we buy. Like, it is important for us to get out of the house, but then it just leads to a lot of spending. So that's still something I gotta kind of figure out what to do about that. But in that moment, if I can't get out of the house, I found that it's good for me if I can just make plans. So instead of, again, shopping, make plans for the upcoming weekend. Look for free events. What could I do in the future? So sometimes looking forward to something helps me in the moment when I want to be doing something now. I want to be spendy. Or even, I read this somewhere recently, plan for your future vacations. And part of me was like, but that's spending. But not if you are already planning to take a vacation or you already have a vacation planned. You've got a whole spending category for vacations. Is there something more you want to research that you can do on that upcoming vacation? Is there a spot you know you want to be going to? And now's the time to start pulling the trigger on that trip, getting the flights, booking the excursion, whatever it is. That could be a way to like be spendy, but in a very values-based way.
You know what else is spendy, but very aligned with our values and only spends a little bit of our time.
But usually free.
Yeah.
For me.
For monetarily, yeah.
The bill of the week.
That's right. It's time for the best minute of your entire week. Maybe a baby was born and his name is William. Maybe you paid off your mortgage. Maybe your car died and you're happy to not have to pay that bill anymore. Duck bills, Buffalo Bills, Bill Clinton. This is the bill of the week.
Hey, Jen. Hey, Jill. It's Jen calling again from Newnan, Georgia. You'll appreciate my bill of the week this week since it includes food, my favorite impulse spending. My favorite way to spend money is always on food. But I've been meal prepping for years now, eating healthy, working out, all that good stuff. Well, now I have a friend of mine on board at work. So I bring her one of my meal preps and she pays me per week. So now she's eating healthy and I'm making a few bucks. Win-win for us both. Keep up the good work.
Jen again with the win. Girl. Yes, if you love it. This is also something where if you found a friend that could do this and you can swap meal preps. Like they can meal prep 2 of one thing and then instead of eating it 8 times, you just swap it.
It's elevated swapping school lunch. School lunch tradesies is coming to the workplace.
I love it.
This is brilliant. You are the friend that I have always wanted. I've been on...
You're the Jen I can never be.
Yeah, I've been on a mission to pay someone to make me food. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This is so smart. And I feel like what you're also highlighting here is this value of community and helping others find things that are going to work for them. Like she's probably still spending less by paying you, eating better than if she were to go out. And so your whole journey to meal prepping and saving money has inspired her in some ways, but then also becoming a win-win for you both. I just love it, Jen. Yes. Again, thank you. If you all are listening and you don't want to submit your bill of the week, if it has to do with being frugal with coworkers, or you have a coworker named Bill, or you are co-working as a Bill, frugalfriendspodcast.com/Bill. Leave it for us. We're ready.
We started talking about this incident. Drugs and officials cover up. You couldn't believe it.
From iHeart Podcasts.
It's like the police knew who he was before they got here.
A story about money, power, and corruption.
The medical school dean at USC was leading a secret double life.
Is she breathing right now? Yes, she's absolutely breathing. I'm a doctor, actually.
There's no way that guy's a doctor.
I'm Paul Pringle, and I'm an investigative reporter for the LA Times. This is the story of an investigation that starts in a hotel room in Pasadena, California, and reaches all the way to the top of two of the most powerful institutions in the city of Los Angeles.
When people fall in line, they fall in line.
Looking back, I realized, oh, everyone knew.
This is Fallen Angels, a story of California corruption.
We're always going to have predators. It's the good people who stand by and do nothing that allow them to flourish.
Listen to Fallen Angels, a story of California corruption on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, my name's Jay Shetty, and I'm the host of On Purpose. I just had a great conversation with Michael B. Jordan, and you can listen to it right now. Michael is known for his performances in both film and television. His breakout role was in Fruitvale Station, playing Oscar Grant, which earned him widespread praise and numerous award nominations. His portrayal of Killmonger in Marvel's Black Panther, one of my favorites, further solidified his status as one of Hollywood's leading actors, earning him widespread acclaim for his complex and compelling performance. In our conversation, Michael really opens up. You're going to love listening to it, and I can't wait for you to check it out.
The closest to getting what you want is always the hardest. It's always the feeling when you're getting ready to, people give up right before they get what they've always wanted to get. People quit.
Listen to On Purpose with Jay Shetty on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Stephanie J. Block.
And I'm Mary Lee Fairbanks.
And we host Stages Podcast.
Binge close to 100 episodes. Hear the inside stories from backstage and behind the scenes as we go beyond the resume and into the heart of creativity and what it really takes to be in the business of show business.
Don't miss our chats with this season's Tony nominees. If you love theater and entertainment, you are going to love Stages Podcast.
Subscribe to Stages Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts and visit us at stagespodcast.net.
And now it's time for the lightning round.
All right. So what does impulse spending look like for you now? As somebody who has hosted a Frugal Living podcast for 6 years.
You changed this question.
I did. Well, you didn't have an answer, and you still don't.
And now I'm shocked. Okay, you go first.
Okay, I'm going to go first. So I changed it so it'd be more vulnerable.
Yes. You tricky trickster.
Yes. So, okay. So I know what I value at this point, and it is something that I have to reconnect with. Probably every year, sitting down to think about doing my 90-day transaction inventory, looking at what I'm spending money on, looking at what I'm not spending money on, and figuring out what does that tell me about my values. But I'm pretty honed in on what those are. And so now what used to be impulsive is planned, because your impulse spending can tell you a lot about what you value. And so now I can plan my, quote unquote impulse spending into my spending plan. So this comes especially with groceries. I can look at the bare minimum, bare necessities, and budget a little bit over that to incorporate something fun every week. Or with a sinking fund for bigger things. So if we go to, I use this example in our psychology of discounts, I think. But if I love memorabilia, and I have a sinking fund for memorabilia, then, or baseball, sports. Oh my gosh, people are people who love sports have annual, season passes, tickets. It's called tickets. They have annual passes to the Disney to the sports ball. So your sinking fund can pay for those and be a little bigger in case of you want to buy snacks at the stadium or memorabilia. And so you can choose if you can't afford for it to be big enough for all three, you can prioritize. Obviously you want to buy your season passes as first priority, but then maybe there's this piece of memorabilia that you want and you forego the snacks at the stadium or forego the experience at the stadium for the memorabilia or vice versa. So that's that's kind of this, that's, you know, I plan for impulse. Not every purchase I make is planned or is defined, but it's always planned.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how, and then that can eliminate the guilt that comes with unplanned spending if you kind of planned for these quote unquote impulse purchases.
Same. What she said. Yeah. I'll be vulnerable too. What she said. Her vulnerability is my vulnerability.
Yeah. Well, we've been doing this together for a long time, so probably come to the same conclusion.
It really is very similar, actually, Jen. Thanks for describing that. What it looks like for me is with food too. So I will put in the plan before we even go shopping. Like, as you all know, I'm meal planning ahead of time, looking at my pantry, putting it all into a list, and then like checking it off as I'm at the store. But what I will also put in the list is snacks, chippies, something else, something fun,
chocolate,
something,
almonds.
And so I'll know I can get 2 snacks, 2 bags of chippies, whatever it is. But then I let myself decide when I'm at the store, what do we want the snackies to be? And so like you're saying, it's budgeting it in or making the plan to spend. And that does kind of allow for some creativity it doesn't feel like deprivation or like this stringent, narrow pathway. It's you decide once you're there, but it is on the list and it's within the spending plan. Something else that I do still enjoy doing, I don't do it as often, but is yard sales. And yard sales. Eric and I both love going to them. And if we can find something that is on our list of things we're already looking for, then that also meets my value of buying pre-owned and buying at a discount and getting what I need that way instead. But inevitably, that does lead to finding things that we don't necessarily need, wasn't necessarily on the list, but we could find use for. And so with that, I go with a set amount of cash. So the cash that I have, I'm willing to spend. It's a part of my spending plan. I am in some ways viewing yard sales as a bit of an activity and allowing myself to get the things that might catch my eye. But I do think I've so refined my lifestyle at this point that I'm no longer collecting things in the way that I used to. Like, I will turn down even free stuff at yard sales if it feels like it's going to be too much work, too much maintenance, too much clutter. But that doesn't mean that I won't allow myself to get something that's not necessarily a necessity, just seems like that's really cute, or I'd love that mug to replace this other mug that I have, or you know what, I have actually been on the lookout for a t-shirt. Let me get that. So there's ways that I incorporate desires to impulse spend. And I think that's a big hopeful takeaway from this episode too, is that I don't think we'll ever get ourselves perfect, or that should even be the aim, to never, ever again impulse buy. I think it's that flexibility is what can help us feel alive. And there is a rush that can come from buying things. Like, let's not negate that. Let's recognize it and understand it. But let's also know that sometimes it's fun to get a cool thing at a good price that we know we're going to like. And it's okay if it wasn't on your list before. Just know that about yourself and put it into the spending plan. Give yourself a set amount of money every month to make last minute spending decisions.
Yeah. And prioritize what's on your spending plan. So, you know, if you make an impulse spend that's in alignment with your values, you know exactly what you're going to take out of your spending plan because it's at the bottom of your priorities list. So it's just about trade-offs. So thank you so much for listening to this one. We hope it's inspired you to want to pursue this life of more intentional spending. And if it has, we would love for you to leave a kind review for us in Apple Podcasts and a rating in Spotify. Like this one, Sitnik1989, nice and refreshing. That's how I...
That's us.
That's how I like to refer to us. I listen to a lot of money podcasts, and a lot of them are hosted either by dudes or by women who have it together, in quotations. This podcast is more relatable to me. I'm in my late 20s trying to figure out how to be more frugal and pay off debt. The girls are fun to listen to and have great chemistry. And this is, I'm adding, definitely don't have it together.
Definitely don't have it together. So, Sitnick didn't say that, but we're saying it for you.
Yeah, thank you, Sitnick. You didn't say it, but we did.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for reviewing. If you haven't left us a review yet, please do. It helps us.
We love it. See you next time. Frugal Friends is produced by Eric Sirianni. You know what I think is more important to you than hot dogs?
Uh-oh.
Chippies. So we talk a lot about your love for hot dogs, but I think it comes at the detriment of neglecting the chippies.
Yeah. Well, chippies aren't as funny. I think my obsession with hot dogs has just become really funny to me.
In certain ways.
It's always going to be.
Look, and Eric is literally at the window with a bag of chips.
Yeah, here we go. Here's an example. We just went to the store this past week, and Chippies was on the list. And we often will go for like just a standard potato chip or salt and vinegar. And this time we allowed ourselves to impulsively decide that Doritos is the way to go.
And there they are.
Yes.
There they are.
My elementary school poolside self wanted Doritos. And so it's what my 34-year-old self is going to eat.
Yes.
Listen, I make a lot of other healthy decisions for myself. And Chippies is
the balance. It's the radical middle.
It's the radical middle. You got to have Chippies with a sandwich. Otherwise,
it's required. It's rude if you don't.
We're putting you on a watch list.
Love yourself.
It's brand new, season 2. I'm Marissa Thalberg.
And I'm Stephen Wolf-Bedeta, and we're excited to be back having bigger, bolder, and always real conversations.
Straight from the C-suite front lines of marketing, media, and more.
We have great friends joining from people you may know, like Vilmer Valderrama and Bobby Burke.
And people you'll want to know. So grab a coffee or, hey, even an Aperol Spritz and come join us on America's #1 podcast network, iHeart.
Listen to Brand New on the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Imagine you're a fly on the wall at a dinner between the mafia, the CIA, and the KGB. That's where my new podcast begins. This is Neil Strauss, host of To Live and Die in LA, and I wanted to quickly tell you about an intense new series about a dangerous spy taught to seduce men for their secrets and sometimes their lives. From Tenderfoot TV, this is To Die For. To Die For is available now. Listen for free on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, acclaimed comics writer and notorious Scott Summers hater, Rosie Knight.
Well, hello, Emmy-winning podcaster and totally unbiased Targaryen royal supporter, Jason Concepcion.
Somehow the X-Ray Vision podcast has returned.
And like always, we'll be here every week.
You'll hear from TV writers, actors, comics creators, pop culture critics.
Nothing is off the table.
Listen to X-Ray Vision on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.